What up, Shangy subs? This is the Mad Shangy here, and this video goes out to all the creative people on YouTube. Have you ever wanted to make your own movie? Do you like dicking around with Photoshop and making fake movie posters? Well, this is the game for you. It's a movie making simulation game called Hollywood the Game, and the site is hollywoodthegame.com or htg.flipbrothers.com. And the concept of this game is fairly simple. You can be a producer, a critic, a talent agency, or a creative company. And the creative company are the people that make the fake advertisements, the fake movie posters, fake websites, etc. And of course, the producer is the person that pitches the story or writes a script. But like, you don't have to write a full screenplay. You can write a short story or whatever. But basically, it's like fantasy football, but only for Hollywood, right? It's the illusion that you're part of this big Hollywood community, and you're making these films. And I played this game. I've played like older incarnations of this same game when I was a teenager, and I still keep coming back to these games because it's so much fun. This incarnation was inspired by the very first game called Virtual Producer, and that was created by a guy named Josh Nessie. And after Virtual Producer was no more, it got bought by a company called HSX, I believe, and they turned it into some kind of DVD scam. Join our game and you will put your name on a DVD for Shadow of the Vampire. So of course nobody wanted to play that fucking game, especially since you had to pay for it, right? And fuck that. So the people who played Virtual Producer started Producer's Chair, and then it became filmmogul.com, and now it's Hollywood the Game, and it's pretty cool. And I only have released one movie so far called The Butcher. And I'm going to read you some reviews of The Butcher, and then I'm going to talk about a fake movie that I'm, hoping to finish and release to this game. So here's the first review right here by Lucian, and he writes, The Butcher is the latest action movie from 21st Century Cat and producer Mad Shangy. It stars one of my favorite actors/wrestlers, The Rock, as well as the ubiquitous Shia LaBeouf. The Butcher has the feel of an 80s action movie. It mixes action, comedy, with a few horror and sci-fi elements to boot, but it's not without its problems. First off, how would you like if my review was like this, with every sentence getting its own paragraph, so the script gets stretched out and everything is choppy and broken up? It's not great. Add to that a lot of underlining and capitalization in the descriptive text, and it starts to feel like the writer needs to hold your hand and point out every important thing rather than letting you decide for yourself. Where we don't have that problem is with the exposition, and there's a lot of exposition in this film. The Butcher pontificates, the cops, who to the writer's credit actually sound like cops, get long strings of unbroken dialogue, the bad guy gives lectures. It's all a bit much, but the dialogue is pretty well written and suitably over the top when the Butcher speaks. The deaths are sufficiently gory and adequately described. As a character, the Butcher makes a good anti-hero. Inspired by figures such as the Punisher, the Butcher lives above the law, dismisses it. Instead, he dispenses his own brand of justice and never kills anyone the writer doesn't sufficiently convince us deserves it. Taking on a thinly veiled parody of the Church of Scientology is probably the most original part of the movie, and the well-cast villain is suitably threatening, if a little confusing. Anti-Scientology scores points in my book. The posters weren't bad, and the site is excellent. There was a good video trailer included on the site. I liked the cast bios and photos, though Chris Harmer's bio was woefully thin. Speaking of Chris Harmer, he's the one person in the cast I'm not sure about. Harmer works in parodies, but in what was supposed to be a serious role, I found myself dismissing him as a comedy relief, rather than feeling anything for his character. The Butcher wasn't particularly gripping, in part due to format issues described above. I read it in fits and starts, but I did want to finish it. It never became a chore. I'm not particularly keen to see a sequel, but this is a solid effort and deserves more than a passing grade. Score 69 out of 100. Costa reviews The Butcher. The Butcher is a crime/superhero film from producer MadShangi. It's his debut film, and the superhero is an original character that he created. I started reading this film expecting an average superhero film. What I got was a totally different experience. The movie was action-packed, full of profanity and drug use, and great visionary. That doesn't make sense. I could see Edge City in my head. I could see the junkies walking the streets and everything else that plagues Edge City, with crime and corruption. I remember seeing the poster for this film a while back and thinking it might be your average rock movie with all action and no storyline, but it was way different. The writing of this film was excellent. The dialogue was great. MS didn't hold anything back. The dialogue sells to the viewer that the city is corrupt and full of junkies. The whole time I was reading this, I was getting a Sin City feel from it, which is not a bad thing. Shia's character was my favorite, who is based off M. Shangi. The whole time I was rooting for him. The casting of this film was just excellent. I could see The Rock as the Butcher. He fits the role perfectly, especially how the script describes him. Shia was also a good casting choice too. Now, Bill Murray, I can't really see Bill Murray in a film like this, but after a while of reading, I was beginning to visualize him in the film. The creative of the film was well done. The Rock in his butcher suit with the armor plate and the eye patch was really good. I applaud all those who created the posters. Well done. All in all, this film was excellent. I praise MadShangi for this film. He truly had his thoughts together while he was writing this film. The action is amazing, the dialogue great, the plot a bit too dark for me, but I still loved it. I can't wait to see more from MS. An excellent debut film, bravo. Thank you. 100 out of 100, that's a bit much. Captain Jim reviews The Butcher. So I took an opportunity to see The Butcher, which just came out on DVD. I enjoyed it immensely, except for a bit of formatting error, which has already been mentioned. The writing was solid with great character development and dialogue suitable for every character. Everything was described in great detail, although there are now some mental images in my head that I'd rather not have there. And it made for a really solid movie. Also, everyone was cast well. The Rock, in all of his mess with me and I'll screw you up glory, was a perfect choice for the title character, and Shia has a knack for playing sidekicks. I even enjoyed Bill Murray as the villain, which is the one I was really worried about. All in all, MadShangi's film is truly one of the better movies I have seen on HTG, even if it was a bit darker than what I'm usually into. Bottom line, go see it and wait for a sequel. 80 out of 100. Goose reviews The Butcher. I was sitting at my desk, going over the final details of Someone to Play With and Oildale, when my wife came in with a package. Inside was a DVD and a note that read, "Thought you might like this." It was a copy of MadShangi's The Butcher, and I immediately put it in the player. Let me tell you that I knew nothing about this comic book hero, other than it ran for about 6 episodes in the early 90s, that he ran along the same lines as The Punisher. The plot is simple. A vigilante turned superhero cleans up his town by killing all the scum that gets in his way. It's a classic film genre that I think started back to the days of Charles Bronson and Death Wish. What makes it work are two things. 1. Do we sympathize with the hero to allow the justification of his actions? And 2. Do we have a villain that is so morally corrupt that a quick death is in order? I think we've got one of the two here. We're not really told why the Butcher becomes the Butcher. A young Bruce Wayne watches his parents murdered, and he becomes Batman. Frank Castle witnesses his wife and children murdered, and he becomes the Punisher. Except for one small scene where he has a nightmare, Butcher's background is never explained, and we never know how he came to be. In fact, we know more about Nig Fig than we do about the Butcher. That becomes a problem when you're trying to relate to a hero of this magnitude. Otherwise, he's just a monster doing the right thing. It also took too long, in my opinion, before Butcher finally hit the screen. I know some will say that it wasn't that long, but it was almost 15 to 20 minutes before Butcher's first appearance. By then, we know about Nig Fig and Detective Joe Solacey, which is actually a real Miami detective I've seen on A&E's The First 48. We've got some junkies and other senseless violence, but nothing of use to tell us about the Butcher. My only guess is that the writer wanted to show us how bad Edge City was, and that was the Butcher's motivation. However, we were treated to a great villain in Dr. TV. I wanted to see more of him, and watch him set a plot against the Butcher. We saw just how controlling his cult was to a point of dominance. He wanted to rule the world through his minions. A film hero is only as good as his villain. Lastly, this film had great cinematography. The blood, the gore, the Butchermobile with its pig head shape. A lot of it was gross, even to the point of disturbing, but I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. The details are great, and it moved at a fast pace. Is it a masterpiece of cinema? No, of course not. But The Butcher is an entertaining thrill ride with plenty of raw gore that will keep you strapped to your seat. 79 out of 100. Benny Man reviews The Butcher. The Butcher is a film from MadShangi about anti-hero, The Butcher, and his sidekick, Nig Fig. Casting The Rock as The Butcher was a good idea. He seemed to fit. Shia LaBeouf did not. He still doesn't seem adult enough to play a role like this. He would work adequately, but he still didn't seem to be the best. Besides this, I really liked the characters, even smaller characters like the prostitutes in the park or the older woman. Nig Fig was a well thought out character in the beginning, but towards the climax he started getting very whiny. This could be purposeful considering what happens to him throughout. The Butcher has characteristics but remains vague for the better. The cop character, though, was very unlikable. The plot, in my opinion, was very original. The cult with Dr. TV was an amazing idea, and the TV monsters were very cool. But the movie starts off as grounded in reality, gritty crime movie, and moves to typical sci-fi movie with almost hallucinogenic qualities very quickly, all with the flourish of a car chase. This was very unsettling and almost made the Butcher seem more like a campy Marvel superhero for a while. Despite all this, it still flows pretty well and kept my interest. I read it very quickly, at least for me. MS's uses of underlines and bolding in the script helped me not be confused by the many scene changes and erratic action. Overall, The Butcher is a great original, I think The Butcher is an original character, superhero movie, which you don't see a lot of here. That works well as an action movie, a drama, a thriller, or a sci-fi, and appeals to nearly everyone. Not only is it a great premise, it is written very well. Pretty damn good. 72 out of 100. Not bad reviews. So now for a sneak preview of my latest project, a live-action adaptation of Biker Mice from Mars.
They formed the portal, General. It's blocked. We've got 2 Claw Trooper squadrons moving in fast.
Getting ugly out here, General.
Protect the entrance as long as you can. And Commander, hang in there. We've put out the call.
Okay, Rose. Let's rock. And... Right for you, citizen. Put a root beer in it, Vincenzo.
Just like the first time.
Nothing but net. Stay hot, Rose. We got a lot of incoming kitty litter.